So, Brianna, I I want to start by talking to you about trans issues,
Oh my
and then
goodness.
maybe we can get on to talk about
We're
how
going
your
straight to the
politics.
trauma. We're just leaping right in. Let's get to
can
it.
can we do that? Is
I
that okay?
I love trauma. That's why I have a Twitter account. Let's do it.
um, and then I think I'd like to talk to you later about the impact on your views of the 7th of October.
Sure.
But I have just been watching your video that you recently posted, which is called Is Brianna Wu Trans?
Yeah.
And I will post that in the show notes and direct people to that. I thought it was a very powerful
Oh,
video,
thank you.
and you're welcome. And I was particularly struck by um, something you said towards the end of the video. You said, there's no one that I'm sorry, I'm going to just slightly elide some parts of the
Sure,
quotation.
of course.
Um, but basically, you say, there's no one that understands what a surgically hacked together, target knockoff version of womanhood I am better than I do.
Sure.
I don't need you to tell it to me all the time. As incomplete and painful as this feels, it's the best life I'm ever going to have.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm actually a woman, but I'm really, really certain that I can't function in life as a man.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an extraordinarily powerful statement.
Yeah. You make me tear
And
up just reading it back to
oh,
me.
sorry. I also teared up when I was watching the video.
Really?
Um,
Why? What affected you about it?
um, yeah, I think it's the courage to view things head on as they are.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that when I'm looking at you or interacting with you,
Hmm.
it's uppermost in my mind that you're a target knockoff version of womanhood or anything like that. Um, it's more that I feel that at the heart of the problem with trans rights activism is that many people are fixated on the idea that they need to try to force people to
Yeah.
see them as they see themselves.
Yeah.
And while I'm sympathetic to some trans rights issues. I've
Hmm.
become less sympathetic over the years, actually, not more,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And we'll talk about why. I think you will agree with me on the reasons.
Sure.
But also, the fundamental problem is that in most forms of activism, you have a concrete goal that people could just achieve,
Yeah.
something that you specifically want socially, that you want as policy, that you want to happen. And in the case of the trans rights lobby, what I'm seeing from many people, but not from you, but from
Hmm.
many people, is um, simply a demand that people see them in the way they want to be seen. And that
Yeah.
is an impossible demand.
I think one
You
of the
can't
things
control how
that's,
other
yeah,
people see you.
I apologize. No, I was just going to say, I think something that has really changed with trans people from my generation, because I transitioned 20 years ago, with this group today is, I don't mean to sound like a Republican here, but we used to feel that if you were failing to pass, there was some agency involved in your part. If you're looking at me right now, I've had a lot of FFS, which was very painful and expensive. Insurance didn't help me with that. I paid for every bit of it myself by working. My hair is long.
Sorry, could you
Sure.
say what FFS is? I
Oh,
know what
sorry,
it
of
is,
course.
but other people might
FFS is
think,
facial feminization surgery. So basically having your face taken apart and the markers from testosterone kind of sanded down and weaned away to make you look more feminine. The jaw stuff, particularly, is extremely painful to get through. So I don't
Oh,
recommend that if you don't really have to do that. But what I'm saying is, like, for my generation, one of the very first things we did was learn to voice train, right? Or, there was just more of a sense that we were responsible if people saw us as a woman or not. And yeah, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I am perfect at any of this. I'm not. But I can tell you as I go about my day, it just doesn't come up. I mean, I'm married to a heterosexual guy. I've managed to do things that make the gender dysphoria not a major part of my life. And the only time it comes up is when I'm online. And I think something that's really changed for activists today is they have this phrase, right? Trans women are women. Yeah, I hate this phrase so much. I think it is so emblematic of how progressives can have good intentions but can set people up for failure. The truth is, some trans women, if you're lucky enough genetically and with some work, you can function socially as a woman. But that requires work on your part. I think it's so counterproductive to declare the mission accomplished before you've even started it, if that makes sense to you.
yeah. I mean, I feel that I can tell that you are trans, but my brain is not screaming at me, "This is a man." So
Sure.
I have no issue seeing and treating you as a woman.
Hmm.
That's the main feeling I have is that I'm talking to another woman.
Hmm.
And therefore it's intuitive and easy
That's
to
right.
use feminine pronouns. If I were introducing you to someone, I would say Brianna Wu. She is a political campaigner.
Hmm.
Things, and um, I think that it's very different from someone showing up looking like looking not even as feminine as a very obvious trans cross-dresser or drag queen,
Sure.
still with a beard and saying my pronouns are she her, you need to
Yeah.
treat me as a woman, regard me as a woman. I find that very difficult, and I'm also concerned about the um, I'm concerned about the implications of that.
Hmm.
If there is no gatekeeping
Yeah.
to female identity, then there are clearly a lot of edge cases, but nevertheless important cases in which that's going to be a problem
Yeah.
in women's professional sports and women's prisons, etc.
Can I say something that, if trans stars
Yeah,
sees this,
yeah.
they're going to get really angry at me, but it's the truth. This is just the truth. Honey, if you're out there and you're a trans person and you don't understand why cis women need to feel safe when they're using the bathroom or going to the gym, or if you don't understand why they might want their sports to be safe for them, if you don't understand that, you're not a woman. You've not been socialized. You don't understand some really basic stuff. And until you get that socialization and you can talk to someone about this, there's other stuff in your life that's going to be failing along with this.
Mm,
So this is a trend I think we're going to come to repeatedly in this conversation, where you and I want the same policy, but we're coming at it from different ways. I want gatekeeping for trans people because I think it sets them up for success. And I think there's a policy in place, that if someone is legitimately medically transitioning and they need to use the bathroom, that we can assume some good intentions there because we've got a system in place to keep all the fetishistic cross-dressers and make sure that someone didn't just exploit a loophole to go into a women's locker room because they have a fetish about showing people their penis, something that actually happened in California. So I think, like, all this stuff was entirely non-controversial 10 years ago. And it
mm.
is the crazy trans activists that have taken us to a place where it's normal. Normal people just won't go with this, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I think that I think in particular, if you're transitioning
Yeah.
male to female or have transitioned male to female, um, there is a obligation to demonstrate good faith.
Yeah.
I think that it's not an identity that can just be bestowed upon you because you ask for
No.
it. I think there's got to be some meeting halfway,
Yeah.
or part of the way, at least part of the way. So I accept that there are people there are certainly some trans women who I very much respect, who really don't pass and are
Hmm.
not going to pass, and who transitioned later in life. And I'm happy to not have some kind of a subjective standard where I say, at this point of femininity, I'm going to accept you, and if you look more masculine than this, I'm not going to accept you. You have to look like Blair White to be kind of
Right.
to join the club. I think that would be wrong, but what I do want to see is some good faith effort.
Yeah. And the thing is, again, like if someone, this is where the politics can't fix your gender dysphoria, right? If you're out there in the real world and you're getting misgendered all the time, this is feedback. You cannot insist that you are the thing and then be the thing, right? The feedback that you're getting out there in the real world is what people are calling you. And, I do agree with you that there are some people that have a very hard path because testosterone is such a powerful drug, that it's going to be very difficult for them. But that just makes the process of socialization really important. And I really hope we can talk about this for a second. It really
Mm,
scares me with these younger trans women how they literally don't have any non-trans girlfriends. And I don't know how you're going to learn stuff like how does communication in all female groups go? Like there's a protocol involved that a man would really stand out in. So there's just like to me, the entire point of transition is to go out there and live your life. And I'm really incredibly concerned by the number of younger trans girls that don't seem to have any interest in that. And just one more thing on this, when I transitioned 20 years ago, one of the things NHS really tried to do in Britain is they would actually not give you GRS, which is the downstairs surgery, which I won't go into because I'm polite, but they would not give you GRS until you had lived for a year as a woman and you were employable as a woman. You demonstrated an ability to function in society, either going to school or having a job. I am really, really, really worried by the number of trans people I see that don't seem to have any job except for hanging out on 4chan.
mm.
Like again, why are you transitioning? Like, what is the point here? So I don't know.
It's listening to you, so watching your video in your own case, and I have also encountered or heard about other cases like that,
Yeah,
like yours, and listened to similar narratives. So for you personally, for example,
yeah.
you knew from an early age,
Yeah,
a- and you personally would clearly have benefited from taking puberty blockers
yeah,
in childhood,
yeah,
not going through male puberty. You
yeah,
would probably have had to have less surgery.
yeah.
I mean, your jaw is less square than mine is, and I have quite a square face actually. Um, Looks pretty good, but yeah, you would have had to go through far less anguish. It would
Yeah,
have been easier to pass more completely,
that's right.
and you also went through a period of enormous psychological anguish.
That's right.
And the very difficult thing is that while I would um, like puberty blockers to be given to children like the child that you were,
Yeah,
I also just think it's impossible to tell in advance
yeah,
which children those will be. And so I'm against puberty blockers for
yeah,
children. Um, and so there do seem to be some. some fundamental issues that I think can't be solved socially or politically, actually, that require a technological, biotechnological solution.
Yeah.
That's one of them. That maybe in the future, at some point in the future, we may have a better way of diagnosing. But at the moment, there is too high a risk of desistance and
Yeah.
regret later, and we can't conduct elective, life-changing surgeries on children. Um,
So, can we go through this one at a time? Because I think we're going to agree on
yeah,
some
sure,
stuff here. If you
sure.
look at the bulk of children that are desisting, the bulk of them are female to male. Um, so that is the overwhelming majority of those cases. I'm not saying it doesn't happen the other way, but it's biological girls that are learning this is not a good fit for them. Now, I wasn't lucky like you to go through like a normal cis girl, like
Mm,
childhood.
mm,
But as best as I can tell from every girlfriend I've ever had, and then us talking about this stuff, it seems really traumatic. Like the stories of, being 16, having creepy old men sexualize you, or not feeling like you. As bad as it was for my generation with Instagram, I can't imagine what these girls are feeling about their own bodies nowadays. So I think what I would say is like two things. So, as far as the FTMs that are that problem over there, testosterone is such a powerful drug. I think I am open to the idea of pausing there because there's not really a big difference for them if they do it at 15 or 18, right?
mm,
Testosterone is
mm,
going to work its magic. So that's over there. I think for the FTMs, this is where I'm really, really extremely angry at trans activists because they have lowered the bar and they have lowered the bar and they've muddied every part of the science and they've made it impossible to have a really long discussion what constitutes gender dysphoria. My local Facebook group just this week, LGBT Facebook group for my town has a very young child that came to their mother asking if they were a they them, right? Because they read a book and they're starting to have these questions. I'm actually really unsure that this political project to tell kids they can be whatever gender they want is helpful just because you listened to my story. Do you think I needed anyone to tell me I was a girl after
mm,
listening to that
mm,
story? I knew, right? So I think that two things could happen, though I'm not sure about this. I'm truly looking into the science and working with people on this. I think if we go back to raising the standards, so the criteria right now for you to get gender dysphoria diagnosis is 2 out of 6 criteria. Yeah, I urge you to go look at them. They are so basic that I'm sure you're getting a lot of false positives. There is no child out there, because symptomology indicates treatment, that does not very, very, very strongly display all 6 for a long period of time and has comorbidities like depression or extreme anxiety or social dysfunction. Like there should be, like, it should be the clearest, most extreme cases that you're intervening with. So, my hope is if we can, and it's going to be difficult, but have some voice with trans activists. They're truly interested in the science. They're willing to admit it's real, even when it doesn't say what we want it to say. I think a protocol could be developed. But I agree with you. We are having a lot of detransitioners. And just one more thing, it doesn't serve trans people to have a system that gives cis people our health care. That isn't good for us. That puts our entire
mm,
political project in jeopardy. So we should be the strongest advocates in the entire world for gatekeeping. We should care more about this than cis people do. And we've abrogated any responsibility to do oversight on this. And I think that's why we're heading towards an overcorrection. And I think it's why
mm.
you have your views.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that um, gender nonconformity is very common.
Yeah.
and very common among children,
Sure.
as well as among adults. And that is, there has got to be a bright line between gender nonconformity
Sure.
and gender dysphoria. And I feel that a lot of modern day trans activists have blurred that boundary, and that's extremely
I
unhelpful.
agree.
Um, I mean, you were not just a sissy boy who was going to grow up to be an effeminate gay guy,
Yeah.
right? And that is, um, I feel that a lot of the descriptions I'm reading as to how to tell if your child is trans, also a lot of the self descriptions of people who identify as non binary. I'm a non believer in non binary, I'll just say that now,
Sure.
which is controversial in some circles. But a lot of those descriptions are for me just purely gender nonconformity. It's just um, butch lesbians. I mean, I have an acquaintance who is a very butch lesbian woman, and she actually, I should say, if she were here, I would say he, because she actually prefers male pronouns and has done for many years. This
Really? Oh
predates
my
the whole
goodness.
trans thing, and also dresses in male clothes. Is quite flat chested, but kind of binds her breasts anyway,
Huh.
and really passes for a guy.
Sure.
And she's a dancer, dances the male role, etc., and calls herself David also. And many people actually just think this is a man.
Sure.
Um, and I'm totally fine with that. And that's a completely okay way to be.
Of
That's
course it is.
one extreme of gender nonconformity,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm good with, um, and I think that it's preferable if you are able to do that, but remaining in your original body, so you
Yeah.
don't have to go through the enormous trauma and surgery, the medical interventions, the hormones, which can have bad effects,
Yeah.
especially early in life, can be expensive. It's better if you're able to be happy without going through that. But obviously, there are people for whom that is not possible, and you are one of those people, and those people need assistance.
I fully agree with everything you just said. And yeah, I don't understand why the trans movement today is unwilling to say you shouldn't transition unless you really have to. It is painful. GRS is not a fun weekend, right? I had
Mm,
this cheekbone when I had this one fixed. I couldn't sleep on this side of my face for 3 years because it just pinched a nerve and it hurt too much, right? Like this stuff is non trivial. And like estradiol, there are studies like, this affects your metabolism. I'm fortunate that, I run obsessively, but like the fight to not put on weight is a real thing for trans women. So,
mm,
I think, and not just that, this is the other part where the politics are not serving the community. So, Harry Benjamin, I understand this is a little bit dated, but I still think it's useful as a shorthand for people. So, he had a scale from 0 to 6 of transvestites and then transsexuals on the end. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And for people that are kind of right here in the middle, I personally did not have a pathway to like transitioning through fetishistic cross dressing. No judgment for the AGPs that do. It's just not my pathology. But some of them, they're a type 4, which is non surgical. They like to think of themselves as women, it's autoerotic for them, and their identities like disintegrate, and they move to a type 5 to the point where they have to have surgery. For a lot of people here that have autogynephilia, they're on this line between 4 and 5, and some of them are going to, like, you can tell them what they are, you can explain to them what's going on, you can give them informed consent if all these surgeries are going to help them or not.
mm,
And some of those people can remain men and have their sex life that's personal and not go through all this stuff. Because just being really honest with you, Anne Lawrence wrote a book on some of these people. It's called Men Trapped in Men's Bodies. They just don't have the same feminine vibes that a lot of type 6 and type 5s have. And they're not going to be set up for success if someone is telling them the only path to happiness is hormonal medical transition. Additionally, when it comes to non-binary people, I was looking at studies about this today. And for all these studies indicating that non-binary people benefit from surgeries or hormonal intervention, go look at them. The overwhelming majority of them are putting people like me into a category of people that prefer they, them pronouns. And it's mixing that
Mm,
science together. These are two different
mm,
cohorts. We have two different pathologies. Two fundamentally different things are going on, but we're just like putting it in a blender. And that doesn't serve the patients. So, what I would advocate for the entire trans movement is we've got to get off Twitter and we've got to get back to the business of honest public advocacy for ourselves. We need to admit when
mm,
we don't know things we don't know yet, which is a lot of stuff around children, and we need to give people informed consent. And part of that is telling them not everyone needs to go through this path because it is hell.
mm. Yeah, I'm really sorry that you went through hell, because I find you a very sympathetic person. Um, I think that one issue is also there is a progressive tendency among progressives. I'm going to continue to use the word progressives rather than
Mhm.
liberals, which would be very confusing because, for example, here in Australia, liberals are right of centre voters. Um,
Oh my
but
goodness.
yes. Like classical, I think it's from classical liberals. Um, uh, so we call them liberals. They are the right wing. Um, so progressives have a tendency to think that by changing the language around something, you can somehow
That's right.
change the attitudes by mandating what vocabulary people must use, and that you can even change reality by just changing the description, which is, to me, magical thinking.
Yeah.
Um, And I think that's how I feel about the non binary stuff. This is just a way of describing your gender nonconformity that you don't really need. And it's just going to cause you, it's just going to be counterproductive because you're making it into an identity. And
Yeah.
therefore, you are creating a personal attachment to it. And that means that you are fragile and non resilient because you're placing your own self-esteem in the hands of other people and what they say about you and what they think about you and how they perceive you and how they talk about you.
Yeah.
That's a very bad idea. And I think we're all prone to that. And I have been through this myself, in that people used to insist that I was a conservative and a right winger because I was opposed to a lot of woke stuff. And because I was an old fashioned leftist, not a progressive. And I would have a lot of arguments with them about this. I would say, look, I voted Labour, I'm a left winger. And eventually I thought, this is just idiotic. What does it matter what they call me? So
Sure.
now I'm just like, that's fine, call me whatever you like. And it was a great relief to me when I finally grew up. Older than you are, I finally grew up and realized this was it's a stupid fight to be having.
Yes. No, I love that. I love that. And I think that's fair. For me personally, um, and this is like, I don't want to say a difference of opinion, but this is my perspective on this. I have a really close friend of mine. She's AGP. She's really normal, passes really well. She's one of these people that was like a type 4 and went to a type 5 and, history of transvestic fetishism, got on hormones, transitioned, it resolved. She's just normal now. You can have girl chat with her. You can go out to dinner. It's fine, right? Um, Her partner is non-binary. And it took me I've talked to her for so many hours trying to understand it, because she's gone through so many of the medical pathways. Like, she's got breast implants, and she's had, GRS downstairs and some FFS, but she also refuses to do any voice training. So when you talk to her, it's extremely obvious that you're talking to a trans person in a way that's frankly very jarring. So, and you can talk to her, and she will tell you that, this non binary identity and surgeries feel right to her. And it's not something I understand, but I also don't understand being in a relationship with a woman. So, um, it's I think this stuff, like, to a certain degree, it's like homosexuality. It needs to be letting people do what they want to do. But it's
Mm,
also extremely true at the same time, particularly if you're asking insurance to pay for it. The medical evidence that people that identify as non binary benefit from all this medical intervention is very, very shaky. You're talking studies with 200 people that are self reported surveys, and that's just not the best science in the entire world. So
mm,
I think, as a matter of public policy, a lot of this is just, for lack of a better word, it's this gender nonconformity that was very common in the 90s was not really a mistake to us, as some girls don't look like Barbie. I think it's this, but almost like colonizing what I think of as transsexualism, right? And
mm,
I don't think that's
mm.
really helpful.
So the thing that struck me about um, that thing you said at the beginning, that um, I don't know if I'm actually a woman,
Hmm.
but I'm really, really certain that I can't function in life as a man.
Sure.
In fact, everything you said in that initial quotation that I read, I thought was kind of incredible. Really very eloquent and frank and clear.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that one of the issues for me is there is ordinary social politeness, and then there is history and
Hmm.
scientific data and medical facts. And where I feel very uncomfortable is when people are trying to blur those two things.
Yeah.
So um, I would not spend all my time talking to you or to some other trans person who I knew and respected. I don't actually know any trans people in real life at the moment, but
We'll have to hang out.
if I
We'll
did
come
meet
party
someone,
together.
I would love that. Actually, I think it would be really fun. um, but I'm not going to be spending my whole time talking about how they were born male or wanting to see old photo albums or insisting upon that topic. However, I think that people who think that we should never use a dead name, we shouldn't even be referring to the history that happened, um, that makes me very uncomfortable. I think that that is um, bordering on mendacious, and
Hmm.
also just it's a falsifying of the past, and it's also very fragile. It's you have this dirty secret that can never be mentioned. um, it's much better to be open about things, and also things can be accepted and dealt with much better generally if you begin with openness. So I think it's important to have to be frank in the correct context about the history. And I think it's also important often for data collection that we know whether the subjects in our study
Yeah.
were born male or born female,
Yeah.
because we want to be able to get information about that, and it's a fundamental difference in our species. And it may be the case that in some things trans women like you are do have a lot in common with women who are born people who are born women.
Sure.
Um, but We won't know that if we are allowing people in surveys or when we're collecting data on medical stuff, on crime, on whatever else it might be, on sports performance, if we're allowing people to just choose whatever
Yeah.
pronouns they like and self-identify in any way they like.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I
so
think
I'm
that's
very,
fair. Yeah.
yeah. The fact that you can change your sex on the birth certificate seems to me also um, very strange and kind of wrong. I think that the birth certificate should say something like female born male or something
Yeah.
would be possible, but I don't like the idea that we are literally falsifying data here because data is important.
Well, I hear what you're saying. I really do, particularly for medical data. I think one of the things that makes this hard is you talked at the beginning about giving a little to get a little, right? And one of the things that I'm telling you, I personally don't have a problem with that. But one of the reasons there's so much hostility from a lot of trans people about this stuff is it's not done in good faith a lot of the time. It's used to
Yeah. Oh yeah.
dehumanize. It is a
Hmm.
slur. If I'm tweeting about Palestine, there is no reason whatsoever to bring up the fact that I'm trans and to dead name me and post pictures of that, right?
Mm,
Which is
mm,
something that happens all the time. So
mm.
I hear what you're saying. It's just that there's so much, it's almost like the trans rights activists and the TERFs really deserve each other at this point almost. They're two mirror images. And don't get me wrong, if I gotta pick a team, I'm team trans. But
Mm,
there's a wider pattern of behavior here where I really cannot distinguish trans Twitter from the Gamergate mom that made me famous a decade ago, right? The tactics of harassing people, of threatening them, of rape threats, they're exactly the same. And the TERFs are involved in something equally nasty. So yeah, I think almost until it's hard to have a cooler head on some of this stuff when you're constantly under attack. Like, does that make sense to
mm,
you? Do you know
mm.
where I'm coming from?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I do. Um, what I'm seeing among um, a lot of the gender critical feminist movement is, first of all, um, a genuine kind of just nastiness.
Yeah.
So lots and lots of attacks on people's appearance, which I think is completely beyond the pale. Also, just a real insistence on this issue and a kind of intransigence that just leaves no place for um, trans people to be um, accepted and happy. I mean,
Yeah.
whereas I feel that some of those people it is illiberal.
Yeah.
Um, Adults should have the right to do what they wish with their own bodies. I do agree with you that there should be medical necessity and there should be medical gatekeeping.
Yeah.
But once you're beyond that, it's you as an adult have chosen um, to undergo surgeries, to do things that you want to do to your own body, and to live your life in the way that you would like. And you are not. There's no conflict between what you are doing is not curtailing anyone else's freedoms.
That's right.
So the problems arise when there is an intrinsic conflict of interest um, between women and trans women,
Hmm.
which we do find in some areas like professional sports, for
Yeah.
example. But um, I think that there are a lot of people who seem unwilling to compromise at all on this,
Yeah.
and who also insist on talking about transitioning as being trans people as having a mental illness, which I feel this is just fetishizing language.
Do you think so? I
You
do
can
have a
describe.
mental illness. I mean, I did,
Um,
it's in the
hmm,
DSM. So,
I think it's kind of, it could be useful to think of it as a mental illness if you're seeking treatment.
Yes. And then you do it and resolves and you move on.
Yeah, and maybe for some people it continues to be a mental illness in the sense that they are still feeling dysphoria because the transition may not be perfect. They're
Yeah.
still feeling distress. But I don't know who among us does not have a mental illness. I feel like the insistence on that is just seems a little bit silly
Yeah.
among the turf types.
Yeah.
And I have also found that there's a purity spiral
Yeah.
among the radical feminists, and among some of them, I think um, their issue is basically with men. For them, trans women are a subset of men,
Yeah.
and it is another way in which men are intruding on women's spaces and threatening women.
Yeah.
And I think that there is, um, it's easy to descend into paranoia about men and male violence and male threats to women. Um, it's easy to become a gender warrior, and I think that that has happened to many people on that side of the debate.
I agree. You know, what I wish more trans people would welcome is a chance to defend our views, right? To hit that
Mm,
head on and to talk about it. I actually think, in the video, you heard the story about, a man nearly raping me, which really
mm,
set me off course for a really long time. It was probably one of the big reasons, like, I dated a girlfriend at first instead of a guy, right?
mm,
Really messed me up. I'm not a stranger
mm,
to sexual violence. I get rape threats every single day. So it's easy for me to understand. I truly have empathy for the turf position that I don't agree with the conclusions they've come to, but I can understand the emotion behind it of feeling that their daughters are being, quote unquote, transed by the popular culture. I understand their feelings on that. I
mm,
understand the fear of I've gone into a bathroom and seen a trans person there that had not done a good job with electro for their beard, and it scared the hell out of me for like half a second, right? I am,
mm,
and that's me, right? I
mm,
understand that fear. And, this fear of men in society, especially for women, they're the victims of sexual violence. Like, misogyny hurts. You can look at what I dealt with during Gamergate. I really
mm,
understand that. But, the conclusions that they come to that are so bereft of seeing any humanity in other people, it's it's not even that it's hateful towards me, and it is, but these are clearly not healthy people, right? So I really I think if you're talking about public policy, it has got to come from the middle. And this is why I'm inviting
mm,
trans people to get off of the extreme and come talk to me, come work with me, trying to have a more fact based view in the middle, right? The
mm,
important
mm,
thing is that we have access to health care. The important thing is not convincing someone of a philosophical discussion about the existence of womanhood. I don't care what someone thinks of me. If they're calling me she, her, I'm good, y'all. I don't care. So that's kind
yeah,
of how I
yeah,
feel.
yeah, yeah. It's sort of the definition matters only in specific
Yeah, the outcome.
circumstances.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, it's not practical. Um, it's I when Candace Owens debated Blair White. I don't know if you saw
I
that
haven't. No.
famous train wreck of an interview. It was on Dave Rubin's podcast, and Blair White, for example, just looks like a woman, full stop.
She's gorgeous.
She
Yeah.
was, yeah, yeah. She was clearly a very petite and effeminate boy, and there is no way that I think anybody would even be able to tell that she is trans.
Hmm.
Um, and Candace said at one point, she said, "I refuse to call her by female pronouns. I mean, she just slipped up because it's you have to actually make in certain circumstances you have to actually make a concerted
That's right.
effort.
That's right.
And I would say that perhaps a concerted effort is necessary in some edge case situations.
Yeah.
For example, if we're reporting crimes in the newspaper, I do not like seeing the headline, "Woman raped these 10 girls with her
Oh,
penis," or some ridiculous thing like that.
yeah.
But in general, we also I mean, there are people who would argue that by using she, her pronouns to refer to someone like you, I am participating in a fiction. But even if I allow that, then we participate in socially convenient and polite fictions all the
Of
time.
course.
The question is just who is it harming? And I would say that's definitely not harming anybody. And I wouldn't find it natural. I would have to, if I wanted to refer to you as he, I would have to really make an effort. Um, so I don't see the point. I don't see the benefit of that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I think that's why we're friends, not just that, but the worldview where we're struggling to find the truth and also your love of dancing. So I appreciate that.
Oh,
I
thank
I,
you.
I do want to say, like, and this is coming back to the turfs, like, something I've really grown, and I'd love to know your opinion on this, but something that's really, really different today than when I transitioned 20 years ago is the extremely sexual public bent of trans Twitter. And I mean, not that we had trans Twitter 20 years ago, but the
Mm,
community and the public face of it is so, like, I've got a friend of mine, and I think she's going to be okay in 5 years. Like, she's got the ability to pass. But girlfriend's like posting her penis on Maine
mm,
every day in like lingerie, like trying to find other trans women to hook up with. And I'm just like, for me, it's like I remember when we all transitioned, we wanted boyfriends. There's something that's really happened in the community of having this sex first fetishisty public it's just it's uncomfortable, right? And the thing is, it's like, I think, like, if you really want what's best for trans women, like, you want us to integrate socially and be employable and to go on and have productive lives. Like, being trans should not be your focus forever. And
mm,
I'm truly, like, I'm not going to judge. Someone can decide what their own like path should be, and I will support that. But taken as an aggregate, the number of trans women that seem to be enthusiastically going into sex work, like, you and I are both, like, I'm 47, and like, for
mm.
me at this
Get
age,
off my lawn.
okay, fair enough. But like, gendered stuff for me nowadays is going out to coffee with girlfriends and talking about what's going on with their kids,
Mm,
right? It's
mm,
not
mm.
lingerie at the club uptown, right? So you
Yeah.
better be in this for the long run, girls, because there's a lot of life after your 20s and 30s. And I don't see any of this being discussed. Have you seen any of this on Twitter? Does that match your
Mm.
perception at all?
Well, I think that there is a parallel between what has happened in among some gay rights activists as
Yeah.
well. That there's um, um, the attitude has shifted towards among some. I think in the gay community, it's very much a minority, and perhaps among trans people as well. But of course, it's a very visible minority
Mhm.
of people who are defiant about their identity
Yeah.
and who actually whose attitude is, let me try to offend you and shock you as much as possible to see if you still accept me. um, and I find that a quite puerile attitude,
Yeah,
actually. Um, and it's strangely, to me, within the trans stuff, it is strangely incompatible with people's allergy to the idea of autogynephilia, which I think is a
that's right.
really useful idea. There is a difference between someone like you or Blair White, who knew from a very early age and who transitioned as early as you could, and someone like Debbie Hayton, who um, began with with cross-dressing
Yeah,
and excitement at the idea of being a woman, etc. Um, and there is a feeling that if you are transitioning for sexual motivations, that makes it um, cheap and tawdry and illegitimate, and therefore we must pretend that this doesn't never happens.
yeah,
Um, found Alice Drager's view on this very interesting, and I think I mostly agree with it. She said that sexual motivations are important, sex is very important, and therefore there is nothing um, there is nothing intrinsically wrong with doing something um, with when your primary motivation is sexual fulfillment. That it's just an important part of human life.
sure.
Um, but I find it confusing that there is a rejection of that idea, and on the other hand, there is some of the same people who reject that idea also participating in a hyper sexualized exhibitionistic
Yeah,
culture.
yeah. I think all of that's really well said. I directionally agree with that. I do just want to say that there are some AGPs that know they're trans at a young age.
Mm,
They
mm,
feel it in a different way, and
mm,
they do fetishistically cross dress, and then they transition, and those feelings go away, and they're normal. A really good friend of mine who actually passes gorgeously and works like a completely normal, very credible job that has a very important function for the United States. She's one of these people. So I do just want to say there can be a pathway that takes you to
mm.
normality
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there, but I feel like I actually don't agree with you that it's a minority of the trans people. What I think a consequence of lowering the gatekeeping has been is that a whole lot of people are out there and they're medically transitioning and they're being told it's going to solve all of their problems, and they're not acting like women, and they have no interest in making friends with women, and they don't want to be socialized as women. They want to be these highly sexualized trans caricatures. And maybe
Mm,
it's going to be okay for them in their 20s, but I've got a lot of questions about how that's going to play out for them in their 30s.
mm,
So,
mm,
I think that this actually is something in the community that's changed, and it's really, really going off course in a way that gives me a lot of pause.
mm. Yeah, yeah. I think it's bound up with this increasing fetishization of identity.
Yeah.
And it leads to a very narcissistic
Yes.
view of life,
Yes.
um, and also a view in which um, that's extremely performative because you're constantly looking for validation from
That's right.
other people. I think that's a large part of the problem. I think that wanting validation from other people, that is an unavoidable part of life. Of course, we all want validation from other people. We all want to be recognized for who we believe ourselves to be, but it can't be the only thing that is bolstering your sense of self.
Hmm.
And I think for a lot of these people, it's become so front and center. Um, and we see that this not just in the trans arena, but also um, with race and with religion, with other identities as well, with politics. I think it's damaging. And I'm a person who kind of likes labels and enjoys feeling, it enjoys kind of celebrating my identities. But also, it's if you are if you're kind of hoping for that validation from other people, it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah.
I have the argument, sorry to make this too much about me, having talked about narcissism, now I'm going to make this all about me. But so for example, I put my Twitter handle as Iona Italia PhD, and lots of people are angry with me about this. And my view is that I want to celebrate having a PhD, but I don't
Yeah.
expect you to celebrate it. In fact, I know you're going to laugh at me for the fact that I put it in my bio. And also, I don't expect you to call me doctor. In fact, the only time anyone calls me doctor is when friends are taking the piss out of me.
I do this to my husband too, who has a PhD. When I call him Dr. Wu, that's always sarcastically to give him attitude. So I identify with what you're saying. Also, I know what he went through to get his PhD. So I think if you want to put that in your Twitter bio, if I'd done all that BS, you better believe I'd have it in my Twitter bio. So I support that decision, actually.
Thank you. I sort of have a crush on your husband.
Oh, he's so great, isn't he?
Yeah, he looks so cute. I love the
He's so
photos.
sweet. I feel like I hit the marriage jackpot. Like, I know it's not a marriage podcast, but he's attractive, he's sweet, and he makes a ton of money, and he's a science fiction celebrity, and he does awesome stuff like help develop the coronavirus vaccine. Like he's really awesome. So I'm very thrilled about that.
I wanted to ask you whether you feel that there are things that you um, know and have discovered, or that you value, or that you enjoy, that have come specifically from from being trans, from having gone through that. Um, or do you feel just regret? Do you just feel you wish you had been born as a woman to begin with and had not had to go through this, um, through obviously some physical and psychological trauma that you've
Yeah.
endured in the past? I'm sorry to
No, it's
keep
entirely
coming back to
fine.
these
You're actually
tough
the first
topics.
person to interview me about this since I've come out. So, hooray for you. Yeah, it's hard for me to say because, like, on one hand, I'm in my 40s. I don't have children. I
Mm,
regret that a lot. I see women that are able to have that, and I just feel sadness every single time.
mm, mm,
So,
mm,
of course, I feel regret about that. But I also know if I had been born a cis woman, I'd ultimately just be another Mississippi redneck. I'd probably be living in Hattiesburg still, like a lot of my classmates did. I probably wouldn't be a national figure.
mm, mm,
I certainly wouldn't, be making a difference on the national stage in the way that I do, or talk to Congress as often as I do. So I think it made me stronger. And it's like I have to kind of deal with the life that I have. Yeah, it's really interesting to me. This is just speaking for myself, but for me, femininity is a gum that's never going to lose its flavor, and it's sometimes surprising to me that when it gets date night, and a lot of women my age are with their husbands and they're in sweatpants, and I'm wearing a dress and full face. So I think there are parts of myself that because I fought for them so hard, I really, really, really value them. And I
mm,
think there's some beauty in that. So, but I'm also not going to tell you there's not immense amount of pain. My family, I was adopted, so that's losing one family right there. And then when I came out, my family threw me away like a piece of garbage. I've not talked to them for 20
mm,
years. Every year, the holidays are incredibly difficult for me, right?
mm.
So, it's really a mix. And on my best days, I try to see the good, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sorry we haven't got on really to talking about the progressive
Let's
stuff.
do it.
Um, shall we talk about it briefly? I You recently published a piece in, sorry, what journal was
Oh,
it
it was the
in?
Boston Globe, a really big paper
The
here in
Boston
Boston.
Globe.
Yes.
Um, I'm going to maybe read a couple of little excerpts from
Go
it.
for it.
You write, my progressive fever started breaking on October the 7th, 2023. You say, in the past 10 years, I've moved into the public policy realm. While my job is to help progressives win elections, I've become more and more concerned about the people I'm standing next to.
Yeah.
Watching Democratic town halls change policy so non binary people could take delegate slots reserved for women raised questions. But did it really matter? Watching Linda Sarsour and others align the Women's March with the anti Semitic agitator Louis Farrakhan was disturbing. But was it disturbing enough to compromise a coalition fighting for women's rights? And as Black Lives Matter protests turned violent and buildings started to burn, I asked myself if I should be speaking up about it. Was it racist to say that setting buildings on fire was deplorable? Um, there's a term for the problem with progressivism, the purity spiral. Leftists have no mechanism to hit the brakes on bad ideas, so they continue drifting leftward. What starts as a good cause, such as looking at police violence targeting black communities, continues to move further and further to the fringe, where supporters begin to advocate the defunding of all police. Today, we are at the terminal stage of the worst ideas. No conflict demonstrates the toxic horror that progressivism has become more than the Israel-Hamas war. There's no kind way to say it. Many progressives have betrayed our Jewish friends and neighbors. Um, so, do you want to talk a bit more about about your what is how October 7th and the responses to that have changed your views or
Sure.
perspective?
Well, I was under the impression, which was apparently mistaken, that progressives were interested in women's rights, which is why I was so stunned on October 7th to, open up my phone immediately after that and to see videos of the woman terrified, sorry, in the back of a Jeep, blood all over her pubic area, being escorted, at gunpoint by jihadists. And see this, I think any woman on earth would see that. It would strike something really primal inside of her. It certainly did me. Um,
Me
and
too.
it's why it was so shocking to see people I considered friends, people I'd worked with on feminist initiatives, to claim that up is down and black is white, and what was going on there wasn't a rape. Um, that really fundamentally disturbed me. And, as I wrote about in this piece, my break with progressivism has been building for a long time. And it's not just, you know, um, seeing Black Lives Matter occasionally turn violent, that directionally, there were a lot of peaceful protests, but it's also like 10 years of behind the scenes work trying to get actual stuff done to win elections, and seeing a bunch of children consistently hijacking the bread and butter work you've got to do to actually get power in this country. So yeah, it's. I think anyone that sees my Twitter can see I'm pretty upset with the way progressives have rolled on October 7th.
Mm, yeah, me too. Me
Yeah.
too.
What is kind of your impression of it? What do you see from your position?
Um, well, one thing I've done is I've just stopped uh, calling myself a leftist,
Yeah,
even though I don't think my political views have changed very much. I think my political views still lean left of center because my priority is a social safety net,
Sure.
ensuring a social safety net for people. But I have felt as though I no longer want to be associated with the left,
Yeah.
in name at least,
Yeah.
because of the stuff that I've seen happening since 7th of October. I think also that I had a more sympathetic view towards the Palestinian cause before 7th of October.
Same.
But since then, I've been reading history about it, and I am much less sympathetic.
Yeah.
I'm certainly sympathetic to peacemakers and forward-looking people on the Palestinian side, like John Aziz. I really admire him.
Yeah.
But I feel it's become like a kind of moral Disneyland for a lot of people.
Yes.
That they've lost sight of what's actually at stake here. The Palestinians are the kind of it's Star Wars for them, and the Palestinians are like these kind of Jedi, and it's extremely toxic. It's a culture of generational victimhood and death fetishism. And I think that should bother you, even if you care only about Palestine and Palestinians, even if you didn't care about Israel and Israelis at all, which you should, but even if you didn't, that should worry you and repel you. That's no way to live. Yeah, that's how I feel.
I agree with every word you just said as strongly as I can in my heart. I talk about this in the piece, but I am ashamed to admit I had not read that deeply about Israel-Palestine history. I
Me
mean, I
either.
always supported Israel just in the sense that my idea for American power is having as many partners as possible, and Israel is a very powerful country, and I think there's value in an alliance there, as they're the only democracy in the Middle East. But other than like watching peace deals fall apart and seeing news about these rocket attacks, it just hasn't been something I've really had to think about that much. And so after October 7th, and just seeing so many progressives say stuff that was just crazy. Like claiming the music festival rapes didn't happen, which that would be a first in the history of warfare, that someone starts a war and
Yeah.
no rape happens. I really started digging really deeply into this. And look, I can't say the entire history since 1948 in a sentence, but I can summarize it that generally speaking, Israel has been attacked by an anti-Zionist project that believes in slaughtering everyone there and ethnically cleansing them, and they have defended themselves. Have they gone too far at times? Of course. But directionally, Israel is defending itself. And any view to the contrary of that is just simply ahistorical, in my view. So it really, I have to tell you, it's like once you see progressives lying to you about this, I just couldn't stop like speaking out about all the things I think progressives have not been honest about, like trans healthcare policy. And just being straight with you, it has been like setting a blowtorch to a lot of my friendships.
Oh
They've kicked me
God,
out of
I'm
their
so
little
sorry.
club.
Yeah, I'm not laughing because it's funny. It's more I'm laughing because it's absurd,
Yeah.
but also awful. Um, um, yeah, how characteristic are the noisy people I see on Twitter, um, of people on that side of politics in general, in your view?
How much of progressive political professionals have the same opinion as Twitter crazies?
Yes,
Is that the
yes,
question?
that's
Most
right.
of them.
Yes.
Most of them.
Oh, yeah.
I want to tell you in good faith, I have spent 10 years trying to get these people to stop the moral posturing. And when I lost my election in 2018, I took that as a learning lesson about, I had some ideals, but I'd never run for office before. I didn't know NGP worked. I didn't know what a voter file was. I didn't know what a universe was. I had no idea how to do FEC compliance. I didn't know what the maximum donations were. I didn't know what GOTV was, even though I participated in it. I went through the process of the beginning of the campaign to the end of the campaign. I learned a lot. And I wanted to take that experience of what progressives did not do and what I didn't have, and I wanted to take that and move forward and do better. So I have spent 10 years behind the scenes talking to progressives like, we need a data infrastructure plan. We need a fundraising strategy. We need to rally around all these more popular causes. We need to focus more on local candidates, even though it's a compliance nightmare. There's so much bread and butter, completely unsexy stuff that if you're interested in progressive policy that no one is working on. And I've got to tell you, behind the scenes, it is a circus of narcissism and mental illness and drama and people that can't act like adults. And it has drained the life out of me day by day.
Oh, God.
And some stuff happened last year where the abuse that I put up with was so extreme. With one political project I went to, I actually spent, I'm in my 40s. It was so damaging to me. I spent 3 months in therapy from that. It was from trying to babysit these children and their emotional state and having them like question your motives all day long or go through the moral purity or trying to walk them through basic stuff when it's just like, look, we're going to do this because I'm the fucking adult here and I've done this before and you haven't. These kids are just, the entire project top to bottom is unserious. And it's just at a point now where it's bad enough to lose elections and to waste donors' money, but when the political project is now veering over into explicit anti-Semitism, causing Jews to leave the party when they're such a core part of our operation, as far as canvassing, phone banking, donating, candidates, the community, top to bottom, when progressivism is damaging one of the most important constituencies we have, someone has got to start speaking out about this.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm so upset about it.
It's okay. I feel quite invested in the US election, although I'm mostly interested in foreign policy.
Yes.
And I am concerned that whoever gets into power may not support Israel. And I don't trust Trump's promises to support Israel at all. I think Trump is fundamentally, in as much as he has a policy, because I think that I find him just a complete chaos of a person. But it's an isolationist. His intuitions are isolationist. And I want to see the US government supporting Ukraine, supporting Israel,
Yes.
and continuing to shore up the basically the liberal world.
That's right.
I think that's extremely important, and I absolutely think that another Trump presidency would be a disaster, and I'm very concerned about what would happen in Ukraine. I'm concerned about emboldening Putin, emboldening Xi. I'm concerned about actual global consequences of this election. And so I very much want people on the left, on the US left, to get their act together. And I don't see it happening,
No.
unfortunately.
Well, when you say
Kamala
the
is doing a
left,
good
do you
job,
mean the
but
mainstream Democratic Party or progressives?
I mean the progressives.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the party giving too much, making too many concessions to progressives, and
I
I'm
agree.
concerned also about progressives torpedoing the electoral chances of the party.
I don't disagree with that. One of the really big problems you have is so many of the young staffers they tend to be really young and idealistic. And I'm sure you know enough about Washington to know, like, sometimes that's an outsized voice at times.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
yeah, I definitely share that view. I wish I understand as an aggressive metaphor, but I think when it rises to the point of talking about Iran as though they are a good guy, and talking about your own country and your own president as though he's, quote unquote, enabling a genocide when it's not a genocide, it's just a war. I really think that this is a viewpoint that needs to be excised like a cancer from our party.
Mm.
It is a dead way of thinking. And, you know, it's I hope this is not too much of a tangent to go into, but my political views were a lot more extreme progressive in the Gamergate era. And something I realize now in hindsight is it was amped up by a cult. A cult that enforces a certain worldview and holds these purity tests and is uninterested in actual results. It's all about your inner moral journey that you're taking.
Mm. Yep.
And, it really turned me into a worse, much less happy version of myself. So
Mm.
I think there's, like, frankly, a contagion issue to a lot of this extremism. It's not to say the policy is wrong. The policy is not wrong. It's the culture that's completely broken.
Mm. Yeah, and politics should be about making compromises,
Yes,
getting buy-in from the other side, um, so that you can actually get stuff done. Being willing to settle for not what you would ideally want, but some of the elements of what you would want. Um, we don't live in a one-party system, and I wouldn't want to live in a one-party system. And that means that no matter who is in power or no matter who you support, you have to look for some minimum amount of common ground
that's right.
with other people. And you have to, if you have an idea that you want to put through, you have to sell it to people.
That's right.
And there seems to be just an unwillingness to do that on the side of so many activists. I do see this on the right as well, but I kind of um, expect it from them in a sense. Um, I think the American right is just the culture on the American right is quite disastrous
I
too,
agree.
but in different ways. But it's the disastrous culture on the left is more important to both of us and especially to you because uh, it's your work and your calling is to improve that culture.
That's right. No, I think you've got that exactly right. And I really want to be honest with you too and say reaching out to Republicans and making friends with more moderate Republicans is really actually deeply rewarding. I really
Mm.
encourage people to go visit and talk to your Republican friends in good faith because there's a lot we agree on. A Republican that understands NATO should exist is someone I have more in common with on foreign policy than the fringe leftists, right? A Jewish person that's going to vote for Donald Trump that we're not who's swung conservative, we're not going to agree on a lot of stuff like health, like trans rights, but we're going to agree on things like our foreign policy. So I
Mm.
think that what I have found in the last 2 years is I've found that I've been able to shake myself from this cult worldview is that something that makes me really effective at my job as a political operative is the ability to go talk to people I disagree with in good faith, look at some bills on the table, and try to find a way to, like, get the money or the support or the constituency behind the scenes to get stuff across the finish line. This is actually really, really rewarding. So I think if anyone is interested in actual progress in this country, at some point it's got to involve talking to each other and working together. If you're
Mm.
waiting for this future where we have all the power and there's no Republicans in power anywhere in the country and we just jam our agenda through, you're going to be waiting for your whole life. So let's see what we can get done in the meantime.
And that would be disastrous anyway. I mean, it's ideas need to be stress tested, and particularly political ideas. It's very important to have people on the other side of things
Yes.
who are going to hold you accountable and call you on your shit. Um, it's very important, and also to have a perspective that you might have overlooked. Um, and even if they're wrong, as I said, to be wrong in interesting ways can also be helpful. I find it interesting that on the right, on the one hand, they are very good at rallying around the flag, have creating the big tent, etc. And I feel that, but at the same time, they seem to attract some absolute nut jobs who end up being major figures in their media or running for election. Republicans have run some out and out, absolute crazies. Um, so maybe that is a side effect of this um, slightly more forgiving and commodious kind of culture that they have, which is you're a bastard, but you're our bastard. um, and it does seem to me that Kamala is doing quite a good job of creating a feeling of big tent feeling and uniting people. I'm not a fan of hers. I'm not really a fan of many politicians,
Shouldn't be.
but she'll do. I would really like to see a Kamala victory. Um, and I think that a lot of the ideas that were very highly prevalent, especially in around 2020, 2019, 2020, I just want to see them die.
Anyway, in particular?
Like the defund the
Oh my
police,
God.
um, the whole idea of the settler colonialism, the obsession with racial identities. I want all that. I would like all that stuff to just go away and people to come to their senses.
This is like the 20th time this happened in the show, but I come to the same policy and I come to it for a different reason, right? I grew up in Mississippi. I've seen, the legacy of slavery and the aftermath of integration play out in public school policies and a whole bunch of other things. I want this obsession with race to stop because it doesn't allow us to win when we lean into identity politics. If it worked, I'd be cheerleading it. But let's go back to Gamergate. I fought a very high-profile culture war for women to be treated with more respect in the workplace, in the video game industry. We did that by essentially starting a war that was men versus women, if you really get down to it. Can I point to a single policy in the video game industry that improved because of that? I can look over at journalism and say, okay, there are a lot more women working today, and there are a lot more games with women characters, and that's good. But the material conditions of the workplace that I was talking about, can I point to something to show this is objectively better? No, because every study shows that it's not. The thing that I wanted was better policy and for there to be a better pathway for women to have careers in the game industry the same way that men get to have. And for whatever reason, we just completely failed to make that happen. These identity wars don't work. What does work is going to the table. If I could go back to those years, I would sit down with those men and say, look, this is a situation. We need some better candidates here. How can we make this a fair situation for everyone? When Intel pumped $100 million into the game industry for women in tech initiatives, I wish we could have sat down and looked at ways to actually make that improve our hiring policy instead of blowing it all on some dysfunctional nonprofit to hold conferences that don't do anything. There's
mm.
so much more we could have done, and I blew it. So I feel really like I have a first front row seat to tell you this stuff doesn't lead to better policy. It leads to social media engagement, but doesn't lead to better
Mm.
policy.
Yeah, yeah. It becomes like a kind of sport
Yeah,
when you make it about identity. Each person can kind of, cheer on their identity, like football teams, but it doesn't go in. It
that's
doesn't go
right.
anywhere. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, Brianna, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you wish I had asked you, or that you hoped you would get to talk about
I
that we
do
haven't?
actually. I've got a few minutes
Go
before the
ahead.
debate. I
Yeah.
want to ask you. So, media is in a really bad. It's in bad shape right now
Mm,
in the
mm,
entire country right now. I don't know. What it's like in your market, but it seems to me that the media that seems to be doing really well right now is media that is like Quillette seems to be doing. At least I don't know what your finances are like, but
we're doing
Mindshare
okay. Yeah.
from Mindshare, you seem to be doing okay. Free press
Thank you.
seems to be getting some impact. So, do
Mm,
you think that this evidence of a media ecosystem, like starting to be born, that again I frequently disagree with, but
mm, mm.
it's kind of non-ideological in nature and willing to pursue truth even if it pisses people off. Do you think this is signifying like more of a shift towards the center, or how do you read the fact that y'all are doing okay while everything else seems to be failing from where I sit?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I feel that I don't know, I'm really bad at market stuff, at telling
Really?
what's going on. Yeah, yeah. I leave that to Claire. Um,
I love her.
yeah, me too. I mean, I'm just the first officer on this ship, so um, I'm really happy that I don't have to decide which wars we engage in and where we sail. And maybe I should stop this metaphor because it's going to get too going to get ridiculous any minute now. Um, there are not too many weevils in our biscuit as yet. I think it's a real. Um, I think it's a struggle for basically all media enterprises,
Yeah,
and people are not reading as much.
yeah,
There's simply that, and people are also um, accustomed to not paying for what they read. I think that is changing because I have noticed that more and more articles are being paywalled.
that's right.
And I I myself, of course, ran a magazine which basically went bust
Oh
financially. So I
no.
folded Ario magazine. People ask me about it all the time, so I'll just briefly say I folded the business in November
Oh,
of last year, and I have uh, the archives have been purchased by Quillette, and we're going to be publishing, with the author's permission, we're going to be publishing pieces from the archives in Quillette. But it's I think that there is certainly an appetite for um, more thoughtful and not explicitly partisan
yeah,
media.
yeah.
So you could certainly detect certain tendencies within Quillette. You would be we would not publish we would probably not publish an article that was justifying Putin's invasion, for example. There are certain things that you could predict about us, but that is different from being a partisan
Yeah,
outlet. We do have right leaning and left leaning, and even a few communists, out and out Marxists who write for
Really?
Quillette.
I've never seen those
Ralph Leonard,
articles.
for example.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
um, but not in defense of Marxism. So that's the difference. Um, I think that um, there is an appetite for independent thought, and especially among people who are mildly right leaning, dissident leftists, kind of former leftists, sort of centrists, and center leftists. I think there is, and even among some progressives, there is an appetite for um, a kind of um, a bolder approach, which is in which you're not self-censoring, i.e., you're not refraining from saying something which you think is important and true because of it's politically incorrect to say it, but is nevertheless not just contrarian for its own sake
Yeah,
and ready to be captured by the most zany ideas,
that's right.
um,
I don't. I
which I
think the
have seen a lot of too.
censorship is almost a red herring. To be honest with you, I think the
Mm.
axis of conflict here is both sides, the right and the left, default far too often into moralizing things. Like we were
Ah,
talking
yeah.
earlier in this podcast about puberty blockers for children, right? And the left
Mm-hmm.
is going to come in here with their moral high horse and say, like, it's a right. How dare you do that? You're a transphobe if you don't
Mm-hmm.
agree. And then the fringe right is going to come in and be like, oh, you're mutilating children, blah, blah, blah. The interesting conversation is when you can put aside the moralizing everything, you actually engage the argument on its merits. And this is
That's
what
right.
I think
Yeah.
people are really thirsty for. And this is what I
Mm.
think progressivism currently has no muscles to provide to anyone anymore, in my view.
Yeah, I think I've personally sort of gone through a bit of a shift which is I used to be very firmly on the left, and however, I felt the kind of um, things I was most concerned about culturally was woke excess.
Yeah.
And then Trump's election happened, the COVID anti vaxxers, um, and various other crazy movements on the right, Tucker Carlson, the pro Russia right. And but most of that craziness is in America. Most of the right wing craziness is in America. And I live in Australia, and we have a somewhat saner right wing than you do. That's a low bar, but we do. So I've become more concerned with craziness on the left again, and I think that's largely because a lot of the stuff that um, leftists are fighting for in the U.S., like universal health care, gun control, public transport, and public education and infrastructure and stuff like that, are things that we already have in Australia and also just take completely for granted.
Yeah.
Like that's not even up for debate. That's not what the arguments are about. Um, so that has kind of shifted my position a bit. But I am much more interested in American politics than any other politics because a fascinating it's just a train wreck that I can't take my eyes off.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's very rewarding. Oh my goodness.
It's just a fascinating soap opera, but also the US is the world's most prosperous and most powerful country.
That's right,
And
we are.
I want that to remain the case. I'm very, very strongly in favor of a powerful US because the alternative powers that would like to come in and take up the slack if you guys let go of the reins, I don't like the look of them at all. We're talking China and Russia and um, yeah. No thanks.
I
I
fully agree
prefer
with that.
Pax Americana.
Yes. Yeah. America's awesome. Even though we're a train wreck, you're counting on us. So I hope we get our stuff together. I got a
That's right.
debate. So I got one last question for you. And I'm sorry to show my extremely feminine male side with this, but what is your favorite? I love to ask this for everyone in Australia. What is your favorite Kylie
Wait,
Minogue song? Because I love
who
Kylie
is
so much.
interviewing who here?
I know, but I just
By the
got to
way?
know. I got to
What?
know. I'm sorry.
I
I'm
have one more
hijacking
question
it.
for you.
It's Kylie time.
You've hijacked this interview. I'm really sorry, but I don't think I can even remember any Kylie Minogue songs.
What? You're the best pop star in the entire world and you don't know any of her songs?
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I'm just not in touch with my inner gay man.
Oh my God.
I think I don't have an inner gay man.
Oh my God, Kylie is amazing. This is the best thing Australia has ever created, in my view. So, wow.
We'll have to cut this part or I will be deported.
You will get exported, yes. You failed your country, I think.
Yep. Well, I do like kangaroos and I have Vegemite and toast every morning.
There we go.
So if anyone from immigration is listening, please let me stay.
Oh my goodness.
Brianna, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on. I thought that I would enjoy talking to you, and I have been following you closely really since October 7th, actually. So I'm just not, I didn't follow Gamergate, so I actually don't remember you from back then. You have a clean slate with me. I only know you from since 7th of October.
Thank God.
But I think I've agreed with almost everything you tweeted. And where I've disagreed, it's a question of emphasis. Like I wouldn't go as far as you've gone in some specific directions, but in general, in general, I think that we're very aligned politically. And I also really appreciate your sensible take on trans issues. I think that is very badly needed indeed.
Well, stay tuned on that
so
because I'm going to be doing some big stuff on this. I think I'm of the opinion if we don't build a trans center working on public policy, we're going to lose the entire thing. And I need HRT. So we got to do something. So thank you for having me on. This has been so lovely.
Well, that's something we both have in common.
No, yeah,
I also need HRT.
Aren't hot flashes the worst? Oh my God. They're so bad. Oh God. I'm not going through that again. All right.
All right. Thank you so much, Brianna.
Bye.
And thank you for listening, everyone.